you know something? These videos are cursed. Every time I try to pull in somewhere like relatively quiet, it suddenly gets so fucking busy with like people trying to move in and out and cars beeping at each other and reverse sirens and things like that. But anyway, you're welcome back to the Car Chats. So I'm talking now a little bit about weight classes and making weight. Very common practice in powerlifting is to like cut into a weight class or to make weight for a weight class. And the question starts to become, when does this benefit the athlete and when does it start to become a detriment to performance? Because ultimately the thing we're trying to do is lift the most weights. When you start getting caught up in the idea of I need to lift the most weights while also being the teeniest, tiniest, leanest version of myself, this is where you're usually going to start running into a brick wall. Now, as a caveat, at the highest level of competition, so we're talking about nationals, internationals, the rules are slightly different because that's where you will start to split hairs. These people are already the 1%. They're the people that have already gone through the trial and error of kind of figuring out what works. So for example, if like Cian Madden has to cut like 6 kilos to make the under 93s, I'm not going to say shit to that guy because he totals over 800. So we're not saying anything about him. I'm talking to you, the average to beginner to intermediate lifter who's just trying to qualify for nationals for the first time or put up your biggest total at the next open or whatever it might be. If you're cutting weight every time you come into a competition just to stay in a weight class and you always end up finishing below where you thought you would finish based on how your prep went, this is likely that the cut is having a much more substantial negative impact on your output than you might at first think. So you'll oftentimes see this where somebody might be like on that cusp between two weight classes. Like, you know, you might have a guy who weighs like 89 kilos. So he could come in as a light 93 or he could go down as like he could cut down to the 83s and he kind of feels like he'd be more competitive at 83. But the process of cutting will change his leverages. It will impact the quality of the training he has for the final couple of weeks coming into camp. All these factors could potentially lead to a worse outcome than had they just gone up the weight class. They might even finish on the same place. I've seen this happen where whether somebody's in the lighter or the heavier weight class, they would have finished in the same place on the podium and they wouldn't have to do the cut. So not doing the cut probably would have been preferable. Now, that's not to say there's never occasions where cutting can be beneficial. I'll give you a prime example. I'll even use me as an example. So last year at Nationals, I competed in the 105s. This was born out of the idea that I wanted to have a little bit more like a relaxed diet for the year. Obviously we had a baby, we were buying a house, things like that. Like it was fucking full on. Like, so I was like, it'd be great to not have to diet that whole time or to be like super hyper conscious of food. But about halfway through last year, I was really not enjoying it. Like, yeah, there's the aesthetic thing of being like a little fluffier around the waist and all that, but that stuff is less annoying than I actually just didn't feel as good. And my food quality was still pretty good. So I just don't think the weight was sitting well on me for like my cardiovascular health, my joint health. I don't think it, like I felt a bit stronger in training and I had a bit more staying power, but it wasn't substantial. And my sleep also at the time wasn't very good because again, we had a little baby. He does not like to sleep, at least not in a way that means that we can sleep. So that meant for this competition for Nationals gone, I cut back down to under 93. I knew I would not finish with my most competitive total, but that wasn't the goal. So in that case, Nationals served as a great motivator for me to kind of strip off some body fat, and I actually feel significantly better day to day. Like I feel like I have more energy. I feel like I can move easier. I don't feel as tired. That doesn't mean to say I'll never do 105s again. I'll probably just do it a lot slower and I'll do it at a period of time where my other like recovery protocols like sleep and stress management are also in a pretty decent place. Now, what does this mean to you? So let's just say you're in a position now where you're still relatively new to the game. You're not lifting at a national level. You're still not at a stage where you could be qualifying for nationals. Cutting is probably the last thing you should be worried about in terms of performance or where you're going to finish on a podium. Because frankly, even if you were to cut and come first at a local open, unless that's the qualifying total for nationals, that doesn't really mean a whole pile. That's not to diminish what it means to get a gold medal at a regional meet. It's still a cool achievement. And for some people, that's genuinely the best they'll ever do. But I'm saying if your long-term aspirations is to get to nationals, it should be stacking the most productive training you possibly can for as long as you can and continuing to gain kilos on the total, momentum on the platform, and progress in and out of the gym. So that means looking at all your non-negotiables. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to gain weight, but lift where you are now, because that is where your body's best leverages could potentially be. Is there some cases where cutting would be a benefit for the average lifter, even if you're not at a national level? Yes. If you're somebody who you started going to the gym because you physically did not like how you looked, you wanted to make some aesthetic or lifestyle change, or you feel like you'll be healthier at lower body fat, in which case that's a fine reason to cut, and making weight for a weight class can be a great motivator. However, just know that it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to go hand in hand with improved performance on the platform. In saying that, I have seen lifters come down from the 84 plus class down to like the under 76 and perform better. So it can happen, but again, it's done on a case-to-case basis, and it's important to remember that the exception proves the rule. So while it is good practice to not just arbitrarily gain weight for the sake of being better at a sport that, you know, let's be real, no one really gives a fuck about but us, it's also important to remember that your vision of yourself in your mind and how you perceive yourself and what weight you should be could change or should change over time depending on the needs of your body. So right now, if you're a 69 kilo female lifter and you constantly underperform in competition, perhaps it's time to try a couple of meets as an under 76. That doesn't mean bulk to 76 kilos. It means stop cutting weight into meets, weigh whatever you weigh and see what happens. That would be my advice. Whereas if you're already in a position where you're like, you know what, I'm a bit like fluffy, I need to cut some weight, maybe use making the next weight class down as a motivator to cut the weight, but also be aware that I might not perform as well as I did when I was, let's say you were in the 76 and you're cutting to 69. I might not perform as well as I did as a 76. There's a million and one other caveats and points to this, but especially when it comes to your performance, like we saw some like some excellent lifters not get the day they could have had at nationals because they've had to cut weight. We've seen it in the past where people are so stressed pre-weigh-in and having to go off and do saunas and come back and do hot towel baths and all that sort of shit, that by the time they get on the platform, like they've already like peaked their stress for the day and they haven't even started lifting yet. And it's a tighter margin with the 2 hour weigh-ins. And I know from everyone that's even comfortably in the weight class, there's still sometimes stress weighing in. So it's just an interesting one. I'm open to discussion about it because I find the topic of weight classes is so loaded because weight means more to people than just where they lift and who they lift against. Obviously, there's a massive amount of identity tied into weight class or body weight in general. I think equally for males and for females, although I do think potentially for different reasons sometimes. But it's a very interesting and loaded topic, and I'm receptive to your thoughts on it. So if there's anything you think I've missed here, anything you think is a good talking point on the pros for lifting in a heavier weight class versus the cons, or the pros for lifting in a lighter weight class or the cons, do let me know. Anyway, kind of a bit of a ramble. Was thinking about it on the way over here, and I just kind of wanted to discuss it. I suppose the big one I would say is the takeaway is if you don't need to cut, don't cut. So like if you're already in I've seen this before, if you're in your weight class already, don't start cutting weight. I've also, I had a lifter ask recently about like, they're already in the weight class, but should they cut a bit more weight so on the day they could have breakfast or have like a meal pre-weigh-in? No. Like my advice is this: if you're somebody who's comfortably in your weight class, eat in a way that fuels your training the best, because your good training will stack more wins and momentum coming into your performance on the platform. I would rather weigh in a little bit hungry one day than fucking basically be doing a deficit for a month on the lead into a comp just so I can have one extra meal on the day. I don't think that's going to be the difference maker personally. But what are your thoughts? That's it for now. Have a good one. I'll chat to you all later.